I'm sorry, I don't mean to start the live stream cracking up, but Scrooge McDuck's comment, this warming trend just got worse. Excellent way to start off the live stream. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Weather Center Live. It's been a couple days since we've been on this YouTube channel. YouTube channel has been very quiet, unfortunately, and I think that's mostly due in part to the fact that I haven't been putting out very much content. So we're going to try to hopefully get back in business. You know, it's been a struggle recently because of everything that's been going on in the weather sphere and just trying to nail down a good rhythm for not only posting updates here, but maintaining my TikTok, which is growing and flowing, almost to 5,000 followers. And we got there very quickly, about a month and a half to get there, if not even that. No, yeah, about a month, a little over a month now, we'll say. About a month and a half-ish. So we're growing on TikTok. We're definitely working hard to stay relevant on Instagram. Got my water on deck. PM, we can see you. Scrooge McDuck, hello there. Matt F150, what's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. Welcome back. Mick and Marley, it is historic. Welcome in. Ethan's Life, Judy. Welcome, everybody. Zenful, hello there. Brooke, hello, welcome back. Superchars, my ears when the ads played. Pete Berg, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining tonight. So we have quite a bit to talk about. Well, I won't say quite, but we're going to make it quite a bit to talk about. As the title already alluded to tonight, we're going to cover the ice storm potential that has been unfolding over the Central Plains and is making its way up towards the Midwest as we speak, and the Great Lakes area, where they're going to get a nice swath of freezing rain and at least a quarter of an inch, if not greater than that in certain areas, of ice accretion or accumulation overall. It's been a ridiculous last 24 hours for folks out there in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas. Let me get my Epic pen up and I'll tell you guys about it a little bit. But it's been ridiculous. I've been seeing all sorts of footage popping up all over the place, left and right, of people getting into accidents, car accidents, traffic jams. One person on my TikTok commented saying that what usually takes them about a 25, 30-minute drive turned into an 85-minute drive because of what's been going on. With all the icing and the freezing rain. So right in through here is generally where they've had it the worst recently, and I kind of exaggerate a little bit using that circle that I drew there. It hasn't been that quite expansive, but it's expansive enough. It's definitely big enough. This is going to be our 18Z GFS. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the very, 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 very conflicted GFS long-range depictions. How close are we? And I have been going back and forth on Instagram talking about certain model indications as we get out towards the very tail end of January into early February, and the GFS has absolutely no idea what's going on. Has no idea what's going on, and I don't have a lot of faith in it. I don't have a lot of faith in its depictions. The only piece of the puzzle that I do have faith in right now is this little bad boy, and even this really isn't a whole lot. It looks like it's more so subtropically induced with a little bit of polar front jet energy attached to it, but you can see that even though I know that to say it's, oh, look who it is, I know even to say that the warming trend is, quote, extreme for some people, It is down here in the southeast, but it isn't going to be that incredible for the large majority of the United States. It's just going to get, particularly warmer. It's going to be particularly warmer for a lot of us, and I'm ready to pose the question, I should say, is winter over for us in the South and the Southeast? Because truthfully, all the way up until February, middle of February, where our long-range models sort of bottom out, and I know we go into La La Land, it seems like we're going to stay under subtropical style thicknesses for a while. This guy right here, though, I have a lot of faith in that we're going to see a little bit of cyclogenesis. Oh, yeah, I do see that. Let me move the chart over a little bit. There we go. This is pivotal weather, so I got to make sure to move the little thingy over. There we go. And I'll go ahead and shrink myself. You guys don't need to see me that much. There we go. That's better. I'll say my head takes up a lot of surface area, so let me not take up any more than necessary. But, yeah, so we're going to have a little bit of a baroclinic system try to develop over the south and then move across. Doesn't seem like there's going to be a huge threat for severe just because we don't have a lot of temperature discontinuity with it. It looks like a lot of our Arctic and more so polar air is going to be way up to the north. Way up to the north. So I'm really beginning to wonder if wintertime is over for us down here in the South. I mean, obviously, we're still going to be, mild. Some mornings in the 40s, some mornings in the 50s. More pleasant than the summertime, but I don't see us dropping anywhere near to as cold as we have over the last several days for a while. For definitely a while. Oh, well, I didn't say that it isn't over for everybody. I'm saying for us down here. We'll have to see. For all intents and purposes, it's going to be very quiet. And El Nino is going to give us one last blast from the past. No, I'm not going to put it that way. El Nino is going to show itself for one last final hoorah. And we'll see. But I'm definitely wondering if winter is over for this general area right there. I really do not think we're going to get a lot of cold air down to the south and the extreme deep south, the desert southwest where I was stationed, Tucson, southern New Mexico. Probably going to take a long time before we get another substantial cold plunge and we see the jet pattern really amplify again. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen over the next 2 weeks. Beyond 2 weeks, obviously, it's anybody's best guess. We don't know what's going to happen. But at least in terms of what trends are looking like, everybody is already going over the spectrum mentioning how hot it's going to be. And it is going to get pretty warm. It's going to warm. It is going to get pretty warm down in the south. That's for sure. It's definitely going to get pretty warm down in the south. We're going to actually be almost up to 80 degrees here in Central Florida, which is wild. I'm here for it. I'm excited for it. But at the same time, this is why we got to make sure our immune systems are bolstered and prepared for these rapid fluctuations in temperatures and weather conditions. So, Theodore, we're going to get to that here in a moment. Hang out with us for sure. Hang out with us for just a little bit of time. We got to go over some of the stuff that's happening currently, and then we'll get into tropical season. I'm not going to let myself go over 20 to 30 minutes max talking about what's happening now, because there really isn't too much to discuss outside of this current ice storm threat. And then after that, it kind of chills out for a while. We're not really going to have a very amplified pattern. April, welcome in. Alfalfa Bill Enjoyer, is winter over for us in the upper Midwest? Absolutely not. No. In fact, if I had to tell you the truth, the only area of the United States who's really going to continue to see full-fledged winter conditions is going to be right here. That's it. We're probably going to still stay cold over the Rockies. We'll get some onshore flow, and if we see these 1041, or I should say these polar Arctic modified highs situated over the highest terrain features of the Rocky Mountains, it'll likely stay cold out there. Lots of good, I got willow fur in my mouth. We're going to continue to see the ice and snow accumulation on the higher terrain features out there, but even out west, we're not going to have too much in the way of intense winter conditions. Our thicknesses for the polar and Arctic air masses are going to stay up to the north, and our systems are going to continue to transition down to the southeast, over the Midwest, and then escape over the northeast. So that's going to mainly be our trend for the next 2 weeks, at least for the next foreseeable future. And in fact, we'll go over to, let's see, is this going to work? This is not going to work. I want thickness. Let me see. Dynamics. Let's see. Do we have thickness here? 500 millibar heights and vertical velocities. That's not going to do it. Heights and vorticity. That is not going to do it. Alrighty. So let's go over to... I'm testing the waters on this website here on WeatherBell. Testing the waters. Still up in the air in terms of whether or not I want to do their $28 a month membership or subscription, but we'll see. To be determined. Anyways, let's see. So we're on the GFS. I still have to learn to navigate this website. Let's see. Upper air heights. I want my thicknesses, 1,000 to 500 thicknesses. Let's go to... Where are we? Why am I having a hard time right now? This is what happens when I don't use the websites that I'm used to. Let's go to multi-parameter. Let's go to MSLP. Here we go. This will work. Let's go to the 500 millibar heights from here. And if you look, right now, we actually already have a ridge beginning to build in over the southeast quadrant of the United States, the mid-Atlantic region. So this is going to be responsible for our major warm-up. Still going to have some colder air entrenched over the Rockies and over the western half of the country. As you saw, there's that 1048 high that's overtopped the highest portions of the central Rockies. That's not going anywhere. And as you take this further in time, you can see that up over the Canadian territories, we have system after system kind of riding the more amplified, or I should say stronger jet stream in a more zonal pattern. We are still going to be somewhat meridional and amped up, as you can see in this wave that we have going on with our 500 millibar heights, or I should say the thicknesses. You could technically use this to make a case for where your thickness values are likely to be. But if you go all the way through to the end of the loop, you can see that we really don't get a whole lot of crazy temperature discontinuity. For the most part, our coldest temps are going to stay up in Canada, and this is all the way through to the 7th of February. Nothing really going on across the south. Here, you're really hot, almost subtropical, extratropical type temperatures here. This is where it's going to be very mild. And then it's going to finally start cooling off a little bit more. And as you saw a little while ago in the chart as well, if I go back just a couple panels, you can see that majority of our coldest air right there is just going to continue to transition. This is a perfect example of who's really going to still see winter. And this quadrant of the U.S., the upper right-hand corner, is where we're going to continue to see snowfall, potential ice scenarios panning out. It's going to be mild, we'll say. We won't say hot. Down here, it will be markedly hot, air quotes, for this time of year, but I suppose on par with Florida as well. So do with that as you would please. It's up to your own interpretation, but all in all, it's going to be a very mild next 2 weeks. And it doesn't seem like there's going to be a whole lot of really significant weather to discuss. Let's go back over to pivotal weather. Can take a look at the European model. We'll go quickly through this loop as well. And you can see right now we have some very consistent onshore flow. There's a very low risk for severe weather with all this stuff trying to barrel its way onshore. There's a little bit of dry and cooler air advection back behind what's creating that ice and winter precip storm. So that's also what they're thinking, SPC is thinking anyways, could possibly help to tap in and amplify some of this buoyancy that's lifting onshore and a lot of the good precipitable water moisture values that are coming in as well, thanks to our Bermuda high out there over Bermuda right now, that 1037 amplified, or I should say modified. I got to stop saying amplified. I get fixated on one word, and I don't like it. I keep repeating myself. So far, no frost in Central Florida. Very unusual for El Nino. Negative AO was not strong enough. Looks like everything is not strong. Did briefly hit 31.5 degrees Fahrenheit here in Ocala the other night. AO, we're freezing down here. Yes, we are. I agree, Spider. It was very cold. Do you trust SPC at least 95% of the time? Truthfully, I don't really go off of SPC. The only time I really use SPC is when they actually have stuff highlighted. It's a great graphic to help communicate to folks who don't trust in folks like myself that there is stuff to worry about. Because if I were to go out there and just pull up a model chart like this and start explaining to people why it is we could possibly see severe weather somewhere, they're immediately going to come with that cliche hype. So that's why I rely on Storm Prediction Center and I bring up their graphics. But if you notice, I never really read their discussions. The only time I read their discussions is if I'm really stumped on why it is we're either not seeing or why we're seeing something in a certain scenario. So really, really consistent and vigorous onshore flow, that's for certain. So it's going to be very wet, and we may just finally eradicate a lot of those leftover drought conditions for the Gulf Coast states, all the way up into Tennessee and Arkansas, parts of Oklahoma. This whole area has been battled, or I should say battered and bruised by drought conditions for a very long period of time is what I'll say, because this has been ongoing since the middle of 2023 after a certain point. Summer through fall, through winter, and continuing on, we've had really bad drought conditions down over this quadrant of the U.S. And obviously this goes everywhere else, but I've only been paying close attention to down here. And it looks like with this 6 to 10 inches of rainfall that we are projecting, this is going to help to bring up those drought conditions just a little bit and try to help bring some relief. I always read the discussions. We need you in that office writing them. I used to love writing the discussions. In fact, my leadership back in Air Force Weather used to love reading my discussions and my synoptic analysis papers because of how vivid and intense I would get. Oh, well, yeah, it's going to be dry here. Unfortunately, we are in a bad spot here in Florida. Central Florida is really not going to see very much rain. We are in a very bad setup, unfortunately, for us here in Florida. If I go back in time and look at this situation here, we have high pressure here and we have high pressure here. So if you think about it in the clockwise manner, We have our southerly fetch of warm tropical air coming out of the Caribbean, buffeting the Gulf Coast to Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. And then we have this other area trying to continue to further channel it up to the north. And we are, for all intents and purposes, in a force field now, right there. We're not really going to see a whole lot of this rainfall action until things can try to punch a little bit further to the east, unfortunately. Well, yeah, that's why I'm mentioning it's going to help to bring drought conditions up. I mean, I'd be very impressed if we don't see anything change the drought when we get almost a foot of rainfall for some of our areas down here in the south. But anyways, carry this through. You can see we are expecting cyclogenesis even on the Euro. There goes that puppy moving up towards the Midwest. Again, same scenario. It looks like we could get a little bit of modified polar air pulling out on the backside of the system. Another ice snow event potentially for the Great Lakes, the Midwest. They're going to be the only ones who continue to see a consistent barrage of winter conditions. That's about it. And then all the way towards the very tail end of the Euro, you could see we have our very, very cold thickness values way back up into Canada. Here's our 528 line. And if you guys remember about 2 weeks ago when we were doing some briefings on the Arctic plunge, the true Arctic brunch, the true Arctic brunch. Can you tell I'm hungry? No, the true Arctic plunge, we were getting to the point where we were seeing the 528 line way down here. So you could see how much of a warming trend we're going to get if it's gone at least upwards of 1,000 miles to the north back up into Canada. So it's going to be markedly warmer across the board. Now let's get into some more high-res model data. Here is the Schref does not have icing. Okay, let's go to the blend of models then. Here we go. So as you can see, this has been a very, very expansive freezing rain and ice setup. And you can see it is going to continue as it moves its way through the Midwest, impacting parts of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, moving up further and further through Pennsylvania, New York State, getting all the way up towards Maine and crossing into Quebec, Ontario to the north of the Canadian border. And then from there, it kind of dissipates until our next system can eventually get going. We're not looking at any major snowfall or ice conditions for at least a little period of time. If you go forward in time here, you can see we continue to see just that corner of the world getting ice and snowfall. That's it. So, all in all, because of this warming trend that we're getting, the weather's going to calm down. And I've been noticing a lot of other sources are trending down too in terms of how much historical reporting that they're doing across the YouTube sphere. And I'm kind of grateful for that. I'm very thankful that we're not seeing any more of this craziness. I wouldn't necessarily say that the upcoming 2024 spring severe weather tornado season wouldn't be a major season because the official NOAA CPC ENSO probabilities chart is not looking good for them. I'm supposed to go on a cruise in June. I don't know what the hurricane season. That's when we're looking at possibly going on a cruise as well, but that's to be determined. We will see. I don't know yet. We're still planning. I just went on vacation this year. Haven't gone on one in a while. But all right, so this is the elephant in the room. We're going to transition gears. It's only been 20 minutes talking about what's happening in synoptic land, and there's really not a whole lot to communicate beyond that. So this has been on everybody's radar. This has been on my radar for sure. And I truthfully believe that this next upcoming hurricane season, 2024, is either going to be an all or nothing season. I truly think that. I don't think this is going to be a season, truthfully, where, we're going to have one or two big storms and then the rest are going to be fish storms or the rest are going to fizzle. No, I think this is either going to be a hyperactive season to where everybody's getting hit, or it's going to be a very, very boring landfall season and there's going to be a lot of action elsewhere. Could still see a lot of activity in the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico to be determined, but that's what my gut instinct tells me, is that this hurricane season is going to be an all or nothing setup for a lot of people. We're either going to get just a constant barrage of landfalls, very bad scenarios for a lot of individuals, both in the Caribbean, Central America, and then back up here for us in the United States, regardless of where you are, up the East Coastline, in the Northeast, along the Gulf Coast, in Florida, wherever you reside, it's either going to be one way or the other. The way things are shaping up, I do not believe that this hurricane season is going to be a meh. It was bad, but not too bad. No, I don't think that's what's going to happen at all. I really don't. Did anybody in the chat, I know we don't have very many people in here, Did anyone have any questions about current events? Anything about the icing setup? Anything about what they're going to see in their general area in terms of snowfall, wind impacts, etc.? Not really exploring too much of a heavy, severe weather threat down in the south. I know it's highlighted on Storm Prediction Center's charts, but a modest shot at maybe seeing an isolated severe, if not maybe a moderate level thunderstorm at best. It's just not a very favorable setup for it. There's going to be very little dry and cold air intrusion to get into these thunderstorms. The shear is down to the south of them, so we're not going to have that shear component to help rotate them or create any kind of, supercellular activity. Of course, we'll still be watching, and I'm going to talk about it on my TikTok tomorrow because it is worth mentioning for folks who just kind of tune weather out altogether. It's not the most favorable setup, but it's not out of the possibility that on top of our potential flooding or localized flooding we could see in the heaviest storms, that we're going to get a lot of lightning. We could see some winds. Outside of that, it's going to be a stretch if we get anything close to hail, let alone funnel cloud activity. I'll leave the floor open for some folks if you guys wanted to ask questions about your local area before we get into tropics. Nothing? Not seeing anybody in the chat. All right, we're going to get into this then. So this was Weather Bell's preliminary forecast that they put out, I believe, in December. Yeah, there it is. Issued December 7th, 2023, and I'm 110% on board with this. It makes a lot of sense because the waters are not going to cool down. We're going to have source regions that were untapped go full active this next hurricane season, because this past 2000, and that's kind of why before we fully go full circle into tropical land, the big disclaimer I want to give to everybody out there, even though I know my channel is smothered, no one's watching it, it's irrelevant, it's not trending anymore, it's boring, who cares? Anyways, for the few of you who are watching, the main reason I'm putting so much heart and energy into this next tropical season is because it's going to be such a dramatic shift from what we saw last year, potentially what we saw in 2022 and 21 for that matter. 2004, 2005, 2007, 2020 are very good examples of what could possibly be what 2024 shapes up into being. And I think it has a really high potential of taking a lot of folks off guard because of how boring, as some people would say, 2023 was. Do you think flooding in Georgia? It's going to be close. It's definitely going to be close, that's for sure. Let's go back real quick. We'll actually just go to WPC's QPF forecast, because that's going to give us a broad spectrum of what it is we're looking at. And now you guys want to keep in mind when it comes to the flooding, when I mention things like flooding, localized heavy rainfall, localized flash flooding, that is likely to occur in your greatest areas or your strongest convective cells, your strongest onshore flow. Because if you look at the totals over the next few days as that onshore flow continues, it's really not going to be that remarkable. Where it becomes remarkable is going to be your total accumulation over the next 7 days. If you look here, we're getting closer and closer to the 7 to 10 inch range in Louisiana, Mississippi, kind of grazing the upper echelon of half a dozen inches of snow of rainfall into Arkansas, well into Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, eastern Texas. Georgia looks like they're going to be right on the outer edge of the hardest stuff. And this goes back to a lot of the tirades that I've had on this channel before with a lot of folks overestimating their snow totals. When you have a situation where you have storm after storm after storm after storm dropping torrential rain, torrential snowfall, torrential anything, this is when you can fall back on your totals for a total period of time like 7, 10, 14 days. For forecasting winter storm events, you don't want to only use total accumulation, that's for sure. In this case, you do. You want to look at what 6 and 12, 24-hour rates are looking like with each wave of precip that's coming on. If you follow me on TikTok, I talked about that earlier today. And then at the end of this event, at the end of this synoptic setup that's going to keep driving moisture and rainfall into your local area, if you live in the Gulf Coast or the Southeast, up into the Appalachians, that's when you want to look at your 7-day totals, because You have training event after training event after training event over top that area. To answer you guys' question, though, I don't think Georgia's going to see a heck of a lot. It looks like the northern periphery could get a total of approaching 4 inches-ish, 5 inches in some areas at the end of this bout of very heavy rainfall for the next 7 days. But that's about it. All right, anyways, going back to tropics. So the big reason I want to put so much emphasis and energy on this is because of the fact that it's going to be a complete capsize of what we saw last year. There's going to be areas that... Pardon me, I'm sorry. There's going to be areas in the Atlantic that had no activity whatsoever. There was nothing to really trigger storms. There was nothing to really get them going to tap into the OHC and all the leftover energy in the waters that could have helped to really blast those storms into a whole other level, that's for sure. I have a comic book store and it does the same thing, ebbs and flows. Oh yeah, definitely, always. I don't think they're overblown, and they really haven't been overblown. A lot of the stuff that we've reported on this channel specifically has verified very well for sure. For example, the snow totals we were predicting in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, even the Central Plains, we were right on the money. 3 to 6 inches on average, 8 to 10 in some of the higher areas, and very, very isolated instances of upwards of a foot of snow. So I do think based on the synoptic scale pattern and how heavy the rainfall could possibly get for the Gulf Coast, we could definitely see between 3 to 6 inches, approaching 8 to 10 inches in some very localized areas. It's just the setup for it, for sure. If you use any subsurface products, you can clearly see that the cold pool has progressed as you'd expect for a La Nina by May, June. Yeah, actually, Supernova, that is an excellent point. You're absolutely right. I've been noticing if you look below, you can see all that upwelling getting ready to take over. The 30-day SOI is nearly positive 7 and a strong El Nino, extremely strange. That is true. That is true. Although I'm noticing different websites are reporting different values for the Nino. That's what's very weird. That's kind of why I've been going off of just anomaly charts and looking at overall analysis data, which is exactly where we'll go here. You can see that the El Nino is definitely weakening. It is markedly weakening. I think I'm on a highlighter now. Yep, I'm on a highlighter. I don't want a highlighter. From about the Christmas time frame, we saw a little bit of a surge, and then as we got into the new year, it has been progressing further and further down towards the south at a very steady rate. It hasn't bottomed out yet. It hasn't tried to start climbing just yet. It's been dissipating for a consistent while, and it's been echoed across all of our other Nino regions, as a matter of fact. If I come over here to the ocean analysis, you can see that there's our 3.4, or our 3 and 4. Here's 3. Dropping steadily. Here is 4 dropping steadily, and then here is 1 and 2. This is the only one that has been kind of bottoming out. It is more so in a warm neutral at this point. Anything +1 and above is when you start to get those real atmospheric conditions and those atmospheric influences from your hot waters below it. Anything below about +0.7, +1 is going to start to really trend down, and you're going to have more of a representation of a neutral pattern, whether it be cold or warm. You might still get some residual effects because obviously the atmosphere has to balance itself out one way or another, but it's definitely starting to get more to a neutral warm just off the South America coastline. And then this one particularly is where we get a lot of our influence from, and it is already getting closer and closer to dropping below that influence. There goes my highlighter again. And I do believe if we were to extrapolate this forward, and by the time we get to the end of February into March and we start to drop out of this +1, that's when we're really going to start to see that subtropical jet, those El Nino conditions, that El Nino steering pattern really kill itself. And we're going to start losing a lot of the effect. When were we supposed to get 6 inches in Central Florida? I haven't seen anything recently that mentioned 6 inches. You'll have to bring me up to speed on the 6 inches because there hasn't been, at least from me, I have not seen anywhere where Florida was supposed to get 6 inches of rain at all recently in the last couple months. I think the most rainfall we were projected to get was between maybe 2 to 4 inches back in December, but I haven't seen anything to represent 6 inches at all for Florida. In fact, it's been markedly dry. That's, April, kind of exactly where we're headed in this upcoming hurricane season. This here is also what has me very concerned right here, this last bullet point. This is why I'm putting so much heart and energy into this hurricane season, to try to get everybody on board with understanding that we need to take this tropical season seriously, regardless of if it's tomorrow, if it's next month, if it's 6 months away. I definitely do not think that this needs to be taken lightly. And I absolutely agree with what they're saying here. Very warm water in the northeastern Pacific is likely to mean the kind of pattern over North America that was similar to 2005, 2007, and 2020. And this invited storms to reach the United States. And if you come over here, we're all extremely familiar with the 2005 hurricane season. That's for dang certain. We had some very explosive storms in 2005, unfortunately. And that was a record-breaking hurricane season as well. And what they're saying is that if we go into a cool neutral, let alone a weak to moderate La Nina, what's going to end up happening is we're going to have a very dominant pattern out here, a very dominant ridge situated over the Atlantic with a trough axis over top somewhere the central United States. And then over the over the Pacific, where we have all those hot waters in the Northeast Pacific, is typically where you're going to get a lot of your ridging. You're going to have your Aleutian low, that semi-permanent pressure system out there. One could argue the Pacific Oscillation. I know we have the NAO. You could argue it's not necessarily a real thing. At least I don't know if it's a real thing. I haven't in-depth studied that far into it. But you could call it the PAO technically, where you have a very weak Aleutian low and a very strong dominant ridge out there. And what that means for our hurricane season is we're going to have a lot more long track systems punching into the Caribbean. We're going to have a lot more East Coast landfalls, and we're definitely going to see a lot more of these systems escape into the Gulf of Mexico, which is something we did not see at all last hurricane season. And the problem that I have with this upcoming hurricane season, and again, why I'm just going to continue, I don't care how many pitchforks are thrown my way. I don't care how many times people try to light this channel on fire. I don't care who doesn't want to hear it. I'm going to keep putting this out on a month-to-month basis, of not even 2 to 3 times a month, depending on the trends that we start to see with our ENSO and with our steering currents and other temperatures across the globe, because it's going to play a direct role and translate into what happens over the Atlantic in terms of steering pattern. There's going to be a lot more, and anyways, the big conflict I have with the 2024 hurricane season is there were a lot of individuals, including myself on several occasions, and I'm willing to throw myself under the bus, who mentioned that, this one has the potential of doing this. This one has the potential of doing this. This one has the potential of doing this. This one has the potential. I didn't do it that many times, obviously, but the point is, everybody was mentioning this, and all we got was this. So everybody out there is probably completely like, it's probably going to be a repeat. Nothing's going to happen. El Nino. Everyone's been talking El Nino, and they don't really understand that we're going to flip the script as quick as we are. I will say, though, I do think the last 8 hurricane seasons have been so consecutively active and drama-filled that lots of casuals have now started to follow weather in that time frame, including me. Yeah, and that's good, but at the same time, not so good. Not so good, because we don't want drama. We want realism. We want realistic, accurate mentioning of what's happening out there. And right now, this is not a scare tactic. This is not me trying to get attention back to my channel. This is not me trying to do anything else besides make people realize that last year was definitely hyped. Low-key, honestly, every time I watch highlights about 2023, I sit back, and even though I know I was covering the back half of it, I sit there, and whenever I'm watching highlights on my phone or whatever, I'm like, here we go, we're hyping again. There it is, more hype. I got to watch this hype video. I got to watch that hype video, because in reality, nothing really happened. Last year, we really didn't see anything. We had Idalia. Woo! Forgive me for the folks out there who are directly afflicted by Idalia, but I'm willing to bet anybody and their mother would stand on high ground and argue that Katrina, Rita, Ivan, Ian, Irma, Maria, who else? Michael, all those storms are far worse than Idalia by miles, for sure. And Brooke, it's funny you say that, because we were at BJ's, I think 2 or 3 days ago, and I'd mentioned we really ought to look at a generator this year. My gut says we're going to need a generator this year, for sure. And it's really starting to shape up that way. Let's go over to CPC. So this is what we're looking at in terms of their overall consolidated average temp and energy for our ENSO regions, or particularly the 3-4. And you can see that all the way into getting into 2025, we're still going to be in a cool neutral. So 2025 could very, very, very well be another intense hurricane season before we finally crawl back into possibly a weak El Nino by 2026. So, obviously that's an extreme long-term, long-duration forecast projection, but I'm noticing a very intense trend here that's been trending on our charts for a very long period of time, and that's kind of one of the major disturbing trends that I'd alluded to when making this live stream. Greetings from PR. Welcome in, Kevin. I did see you earlier. Let's see. Gotta say, I'm starting to get worried for this season and the next one. People don't realize how global warming will be the end of everything, sadly. I don't know if it would go as far as to say it'll be the end of everything, but I do think it's going to be the end of weather as we know it, especially if we continue to see these increases in global sea temperature. We're going to start seeing patterns that blow off the charts across the globe and start changing the way we look at things. Dorian, good call. Hugo, Andrew, Gilbert, Mitch. Yep. Great Galveston Hurricane in 1900. Yep. Noel, Dean, Camille. Yep. It seems like you have these below webpage. You have these below webpage seasons are going to, well, Maddie, I'm not too sure what you're saying. Have these below webpage seasons are going to become more rare as the planet continues to warm. I should mention that the 2007 hurricane season, we did not see any U.S. landfalls. Kevin, welcome in. Unless I'm confused or not, I remember back in one of those years they were calling for an unprecedented La Nina, but it never really happened. Good call out, Ethan. Labor Day hurricane in 1935. Cool neutral to weak La Nina is concerning. It is very concerning. This is what their predictions are long-term for the ENSO setup for the next couple of years, and it's also backfilled or supported by the anomalies here. You can see that we are coming out of a strong El Nino, and it is now forecasted to really rapidly dissipate, and we'll essentially be in a neutral pattern by the time we hit February, March, and April. I know it says 0.69, and that's 3/4 of the way to that +1 we were talking about, but we're already starting to see conditions dissipate. And this is definitely a little concerning for our hurricane season, because that means by the time we get to April, May, June, we'll be right at the neutral threshold, which means our protective blister of the wind shear and the weird steering pattern is going to be nil to none. It's going to be gone. We're going to be in a neutral level playing field across the Atlantic. And essentially what that means is, if we go over here, we'll just use this. We'll go ahead and use our anomalies, because this is also very concerning. Look at how hot the Atlantic basin is. We have not seen any kind of changes. The cooling is not happening in the Gulf of Mexico. And in fact, if I come back to the ocean analysis real quick and you look, can you click the arrow? Thank you. If you come back to the ocean analysis and look at the 7-day difference, you can see that there are a lot of areas that are actually warming still. The Gulf of Mexico is slowly warming back up. The tropical Atlantic towards the Cabo Verdes is warming up. We've been seeing a lot of warming around Bermuda, even with these very cold, high pressures coming off of the Atlantic coastline or the east coast of the U.S. We're seeing some very weird warming trends across the board, and that's what's very concerning. But anyways, this is what I'm also concerned about if we get these hot temperatures out over the northern Pacific, like they've been mentioning. This right here. This is exactly what they're talking about right there. That's what's going to help to really influence the pattern over the United States, over North America, over the Atlantic. Because if you think about it, this is going to be a ridge, this is going to be a trough, this is going to be a ridge, this is going to be a trough, and then we have a ridge, and so on and so forth. And if we have a very dominant trough axis over this way, then what's likely going to happen is we're going to have a very strong NAO where our systems are going to be very dominant out over this way in the low levels. And then we're going to have really, really good conditions to steer these storms off to the west, provided by our systems that are a little bit weaker over the, not the Atlantic, excuse me, over North America. Where are you? I heard you. Oh, you're right there. Hi. What are you doing? I went quiet, and all of a sudden I hear a brrr, and Willow's right below me. So anyways, back to this chart here. So as we know, what happened with El Nino is we had a trough pretty much set up right there. We had a trough, we had our wind shear blowing across like this, and we had a very, very elongated Atlantic high like that. And so that allowed a lot of our systems to do this. Almost every single one of them did something along the lines of this. A couple of them coming very close, the hype storms I call them, and they brushed against the Lesser Antilles. And, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking away from what happened out there. Obviously, they saw some pretty intense impacts with those scraping by of the storms, but overall, we dodged a lot of bullets. We had one, whoop, that was it, just the one. And then we had Ophelia and Harold. I always forget his name because no one talked about it. There really wasn't a whole lot that went on with Tropical Storm Harold. I think it was like a 45-mile-an-hour wind tropical storm that hit South Texas, and it was gone. It was just rain for them. What ends up happening if we change the pattern, I can't think tonight. I think the Monday vibes are also getting me as well. If we change the pattern, what ends up happening is we have a neutral pattern like so. There's our trough, and here's our high pressure out here. So you can kind of see, and I should probably use a different pen right there and right there. So the key takeaway here is if we were to stay in a cool neutral to a closer neutral pattern, we're going to see a lot of storms doing this, like so, with a few escaping into the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. And if we were to go into a La Nina pattern, that's for sure. That's what's going to have this kind of a setup here where we have a very dominant high pressure trough back over the United States, and you can kind of see the general takeaway is we're going to have long track systems moving through the Caribbean, moving into the Gulf of Mexico, some of which trying to escape like this. And it just becomes a bit more of a hazard for the Southeast, the Caribbean islands, the Bahamas, and the Gulf Coast states, for sure. But didn't also those historically warm sea surface temps weaken the high in the Azores? It's going to be a tough call. It's definitely going to be a tough call because we're going to have our upper level influence helping to provide us with very, very strong synoptic scale semi-permanent pressure systems. I don't think we're going to be hot enough to the north to really weaken down that high pressure. And that high pressure is also going to be supported by jets and other prevailing wind patterns out there. So we'll have to see. That's why I'm thinking it's either going to be an all or nothing setup. We're either going to get a whole lot of really bad stuff out there, or there's going to be a whole lot of nothing going on because our waters are just all dorked up. If you come over here and look as well, let me change the AOI on this. We'll go to North Atlantic as well. As you can see, where our high pressure sets up right in through here, we're not going to get all that hot. We're going to see this really start to fill out with very hot temperatures all the way across the board. But this high pressure up here is still going to be very dominant, and we're going to have a lot of good upper level influence to help drive storms off to the west. Harold, my poor friend, was being giggled at by me during that. Harold, look out. Since more are observing the weather, more are hyper aware, which is why we get too much hype. That is for dang certain. Knowing the Gulf of Mexico, it warms up surprisingly fast during in the warm seasons, no matter how cold as the cold seasons are, and that's the scary part about the Gulf of Mexico. Do we also think the PDO will change from cold to warm for this season? I can't read the rest of your comment because of that blasted heart in the way. There we go. That could be a random factor to deal with. Okay. We'll definitely, there's a couple of other very finite variables. I would say the PDO is definitely one of them. We definitely want to watch that for sure. We have the PDO, and then we also have our Saharan dust layer. If our Saharan dust is very prominent, then we're only going to get a lot of action out over this area. June, July, October, November could possibly be when things really light up for the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. We'll definitely have to kind of be determined for the Atlantic area, depending on what our Saharan dust layer does coming off of Africa. Most warming of the Earth has occurred from the 80s to now. It seems like when it's tropics time, everyone forgets about weather at home and we talk about what's happening in the tropics, or is it just that not much big storms happened in the U.S. during summer? Truthfully, it is kind of a mixture of people just hyperfixate on the tropics, and on the same token, we don't really see too much over the United States. Because when you think about it, in the summertime pattern, it's just hot everywhere. We have very weak fronts, very weak shortwave and longwave troughs. We don't have a whole lot of baroclinicity or temperature contrast that really helps to ignite a tremendous amount of thunderstorm activity. We don't have very large-scale storm systems. In essence, the tropical season is like the winter time of the Atlantic, if you really want to put it that way. Right now, we're basically in the hurricane season of the Northern Hemisphere over North America. We have all of our mid-latitude cyclones moving over the United States and bombing out, creating these snowstorm setups. Then when we switch seasons, we have the tropical setup that have our tropical cyclones forming in the warmer parts of the atmosphere, and they spin a different direction and they follow a different prevailing wind direction. So that's why they come out of the tropics and flow west, or come out of the equatorial regions and flow west, whereas during the wintertime they flow eastward because they're following the easterlies. I forget what the actual terminology is for the easterlies. Prevailing westerlies, the easterly, I forget what the actual term is. I just read it. I'm sorry. I forgot about what the actual terminology is. But that's essentially, if you really want to boil it down, we have hurricane season. It's just called a different term. We have our cyclone season over the winter time, and then we have our cyclone season over the summertime. That's the only difference. That's the big takeaway there. We have all of our systems doing this over the U.S., and then we have all our systems doing this over the Atlantic during the summertime. That's really it. Imagine the whole entire continent of Africa was a tropical rainforest. That'd be wild. Those are strong storms that come through, but NASA's chart is on sections 4-year average. Don't forget typhoons. Oh, well, yeah, I'm just using examples, Maddie. I'm just using very, very generic examples. They all have different types of names. Typhoon is just another nickname for a tropical cyclone. Wow, I don't know what's going on, but I'm crashing out big time right now. Shoot, I'm getting very tired. I know, mamas. Not American, so not really sure about winter over there, but which is more deadly and dangerous for the U.S.? Generally, winter season or hurricane season? Obvious hurricane seasons are more costly. It really depends. That's a very good question, I'll tell you the truth. Definitely a really good question because, a lot of it has to depend on where it is they hit in the tropical season, their actual intensity, what sort of impacts we see with them, how fast they're moving, and so on and so forth. The same thing with our winter storms, for sure. Winter storms, depending on where they move, what the steering current is like, what the jet support is like, they could be very, very impactful, just as impactful like a couple of our bomb cyclones that we've had. But one could argue that they're both equally destructive, equally as harmful, because they cover about the same geographic region. A lot of them will really deepen down and blow up over parts of the Midwest, the northern tier, the Northeast. We'll have our tornado and severe weather outbreaks down over the South. And one could argue that they're just as dangerous and just as deadly. Well, yeah, and that too. It depends, obviously, where you live. Yeah, and that's another thing too. And even that, you could argue that tooth and nail. Some can say that winter storms are more deadly if you have the right setup because you'll get tornadoes and severe weather, flooding, hail down from the south of the system. You'll get lots of freezing rain, bad icing, severe clear icing. You'll have a lot of snowfall, blizzard conditions that can kill people, knock out power, etc. for the north. Same thing with tropical season. You could, when you look at it from that standpoint, you could almost say that winter storms are a little bit more treacherous. I'm not going to say dangerous or life-threatening. I'll say treacherous than hurricanes, because Hurricanes are going to be a lot more treacherous and deadly for folks on islands and even the immediate coastline. Whereas winter storms, they're going to cover a larger area of land, a larger geographic region, and they will deepen down over land, so conditions will actually get worse once the low pressure gets parked on you. In terms of cost, that's when definitely you have the hurricanes. The hurricanes are probably going to be a lot more costly, depending on a number of the different variables again. But yeah, you can go back and forth. That's like a whole debate. I'm not going to get into that right now. We're definitely not going to debate that. That is definitely up for debate, though. It's pick your poison, essentially. Both of them are definitely going to be rough, no matter what, for sure. Ashton, welcome in. 2021 Texas freeze is an example of a location impact for winter storms. Absolutely. Tanya, welcome in. I did see you messaging earlier, I should say. I'm new to this weather. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Definitely. Let's see here, though. What else did we want to look at? I had a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to bring out for you guys, and I only got through half of preparing it and whatnot because of how busy the workday was today. We'll go ahead and leave it on the United States as we get ready to wrap up the live stream. And you know what? I'll definitely openly admit I've been really grinding hard on the TikTok recently. TikTok has been steadily growing and glowing. And so I've been putting a lot of my efforts into the TikTok for a little while now. And I know that's kind of a shame on me because I want to keep a nice fine balance with everybody here. But it's definitely tough. It's definitely very tough to balance the workload. You know, and I'm also noticing that a lot of our longtime viewers are gone. There's a lot of longtime folks who were here for the tropics and made it into the new year, and then they dipped out. I haven't seen them pop up at all recently. I'm not going to name any names, but I can think of a nice handful immediately who just don't tune in, don't comment anymore, and they dropped off the spectrum. Not sure why. You know, but, I mean, you know, things happen. People move on. They find different sources. Perhaps they've gone elsewhere. I heard something like 20 died from the winter storm in Tennessee. I definitely could see that happening, unfortunately. And, you know, a lot of it comes in part to just the foolish maneuvers that people make during the winter storms. That's precisely what it is that I try to emphasize, whether it be a winter, a summer, a spring, a fall, a tropical, etc. If you put yourself in a bad situation, you're going to make matters worse. It doesn't take a lot of severe weather to create a dangerous setup for any type of weather scenario. It could be light rain and you have D-bags on the road who don't know how to maneuver it. You could end up getting killed or injuring a bunch of people because you don't know what you're doing. Same thing with tropical systems, with winter storm systems. They come in all shapes and sizes. You know, you just have to be very careful and tread lightly through those scenarios. So unfortunately, I could definitely see that there could be 20 some odd people who pass away in these winter storms, especially when I see traffic pileups and vehicles obliterated and spinning out of control because they want to go zooming down the road and extreme icing and whatnot. Oh no, Supercharas, JJ614, Amanda, I definitely see you guys tuning in. There's just a few other big names that used to pop up and really contribute to the chat who really just stopped showing up. And I know a few of them are still out there because Instagram gives me notifications of when certain people view your profile or when they view your stories, and I still see them, so they've gone to lurker mode. I don't know why, but it's neither here nor there. Yeah, honestly, I'm not a fan of it, PM. I was going to mention that earlier. I noticed that yesterday we had sunshine and whack. Now we're back under gray skies and gray conditions and no rain. It's just been gloomy. That's it. It's just been very gloomy. Ethan, also, I saw your comments earlier. I wasn't ignoring you. I was just kind of going over everything as quick as I could. I do really apologize and send my condolences for your great-grandmother passing away. Are you accusing us for not coming to watch? Well, when some people mention that they're going to stick around, I do think that there is room to say something. Because, I'm welcoming to everybody out there who wants to come and watch the streams, come and tune into the videos. And I love the support far and wide, no matter who it is, even if it is for a short period of time. It's just because of the fact that I've been putting effort in elsewhere, I think that some people have dropped off because they just don't see the energy on this channel anymore, or maybe they don't see the emphasis and all that. I don't know, it could be a mixture of reasons, or I did something to piss people off. Who knows? Tyler, I'm in Florida, Central Florida. Let's start a pool to see which model does the best this season. Yeah, Scrooge, I would definitely say let's do it. I would say let's do it. Get a poll going to see exactly what model does the best this hurricane season. I think that's a good idea. Because I know last hurricane season, I would say the Canadian model was one of my better models that I enjoyed using, and the Euro and the Icon to an extent. I would say Euro and Icon were neck and neck, and GFS was like the last. Oh, Willow's howling. I don't know if you heard that. Anybody gonna pull the whatchamacallit, the GFS? Anyone's gonna put money on the GFS? Oh yeah, of course, Supernova. Yeah, it goes without saying. That's why I've been really putting a lot of emphasis into my other social media as much as I can, while I have the extra spare time and the extra energy, I guess you could say, to put into my other social media platforms. And like I said, TikTok is doing pretty good for itself. I'm pretty impressed, surprisingly. Like I said, we're getting close to 5,000 followers, and I want to get up to 10,000 so I can hopefully monetize that as well alongside YouTube. We'll see. Are you looking forward to anything? Movies, perhaps? Truthfully, come to think of it, there really aren't any good movies coming up on the immediate horizon that I can think of. Or at least off the top of my head. I have sleepy brain right now, so maybe that's also why I can't think too straight. But, yeah, off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything big that I'm really excited for. The only thing that comes to mind is my best friend from out in Arizona is going to be coming to visit at the end of February. We're going to go to a big car event down in West Palm Beach, Fuel Fest. I think it's February 25th. So I'm pretty excited about that. But all in all, no, just surviving, grinding, and trying to thrive as much as I can. It feels like everything is blurring together, truthfully. You got YouTube, you got Instagram, you got TikTok now, you got X. I dorked up and let one of my weather subscriptions die, so now I have to go back and resubscribe to their website for an additional cost because it's more expensive now for some reason, which is annoying, so Pete, I appreciate what you're saying. I don't know. I don't think it's entirely me, although I'm definitely noticing that some of my content is a little more slacked off because I've been putting energy into other priorities. I don't know how some of these channels can do it. I give them kudos. I don't know if they're full-time on here or not, but shoot, doing the 6, 8, 10-hour live streams, I love you guys, but there's just no way in heck I have that kind of time in my personal life to where I could sit at I get tired of sitting at work for an hour. At least you guys make the live streams fun, and we can keep talking, but shoot, doing 6 to 12-hour live streams, there's no way in. Unless you guys are donating $10 each per hour, then maybe. But shoot, yeah, those I don't know how some people do it. Putting out 1 to 2 videos per day with a live stream here and there, they have to be full-time YouTube, because there's no way in, I'll even say, there's no way in hell that I could manage to do that. Full-time school, full-time job, full-time family man, full-time, what else? Back in the military now, full-time other social media content creator. It's rough. See, I wish I could do that, PEXTT. I definitely want to do that. I hope my family is staying safe in the Lou. Naz, how's it looking? Louisiana? It's going to be very rainy. Louisiana is going to take the brunt of all this very heavy rainfall, that's for sure. Looks like the ice threat is ending. For Louisiana, yes, it's going to continue up to the north like we talked about at the very beginning of this live discussion. But I wish I could do that. I wish I had the money to pay for a small social media team, because that would definitely be a lot easier. At least for YouTube. At least like a YouTube editor. I wish I could do some, at least I wish I could find somebody who could edit videos for me, and I don't know, slide them $20 a video or something like that. But even that would get expensive over time. If I start doing videos of back like I was doing before with 5, 6, 7 times a week, that's going to start dipping into my paydays pretty heftily. That's not even a word, but you know what I mean. Military is military, that's for sure. Not much going on there. We will see. We'll definitely see what happens as we get closer to the summertime, Pete. We'll start doing more preliminary forecasts. We'll start taking advantage of chase season when we can, that's for sure. But, PM, we can talk about that offline if you want. People call St. Louis the Lou. Oh, I haven't heard that. Mama's is ready to go to bed. And I think I am too. I'm crashing out big time. It's been a long day. It's been a long day for sure. Yeah, but it's still not looking good for the 2024 hurricane season according to the official NAO CPC ENSO probabilities chart. St. Louis, Missouri could possibly be getting ice. Yes, that's for certain. In fact, just looking at this infrared satellite shot, it looks like a lot of the icing threat could possibly be over, or at least a little further downstream now. Right there. Actually, the satellite loop looks like it skips. Satellite loop looks like it skips. It looks like a lot of it, I would imagine, is probably transitioned to rainfall by now. This is probably likely all rain, with being open through here going to be the icing threat. Let me change this like this. That looks like it could be the icing up to the north. This is all going to be rainfall. High cloud and rainfall to the south. This is your icing event possibly unfolding for Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, moving up towards Michigan, parts of Wisconsin. They're saying it's going to ice, but there's no ice on the radar, just regular rain. It is going to be Mardi Gras time very soon. That is very true. I can't believe it's already going to be February here in a couple days. 2024 hurricane season could be worse than 2020. I do agree with that. That's for sure. See, I don't know. That's also a toss-up, Scrooge McDuck. It's going to be a huge toss-up. June, July could be very active, because this last year it was technically active. We just didn't really get to see anything do anything because of the wind shear and the steering pattern. So, I don't know. It's going to be a tough call as well. We'll have to see exactly what everything looks like as we get into May, and then right at the start of June 1st. That'll tell us everything. Truthfully, JJ, if I could be brutally honest, in 2024, I definitely don't realize how bad 2020 was, because that was as COVID was kicking off. COVID was going crazy. I was not paying attention to the tropics. I was out in Arizona. I was more focused on the closures, what was happening with the military, what was happening with the coronavirus and all that. I personally do not recollect how bad it was, so I want to spin myself up on that ASAP. Just for the sake of getting a bit more well-versed. Oh, yeah, wow. That's a La Nina pattern for sure. 175% La Nina. That's what it looks like right there. There's your general La Nina track. Got a couple tropical storms into Florida. Lots of Caribbean activity, though, and lots of Gulf of Mexico activity. That's what my main concern is for 2024. And actually, you know what? 2020, just looking at this chart right here, was very unprecedented. Because look at that. To go back to what you said before, Scrooge, we had 2 named storms in May. We had 2 named storms in June, 5 named storms in July, 5 in August, a buttload in September. I'm not even going to count all those. And then we had the full extension through October and November. Just looking at that right there, that tells all. And you know what? If I'm not mistaken, 2020 was a very, very, very strong La Nina setup, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it? Somebody fact check me on that. Wasn't La Nina very, very strong? Enzo 2020. Yeah, so look at that. That was 2020. And if we compare this to where we're thinking we're going to be here, so yeah, that's not good. We're going to stay below the +1 threshold. And 2020 was well into the -1 threshold. We were about, like, what looks like -1.3 to -1.5. So then one could infer that in 2020, a large clustering of our storms could be somewhere right in through here. So yeah, Florida, the Gulf Coast, the Southeast are definitely going to get it. They're definitely going to get it this upcoming hurricane season. Because if we had a moderate to slightly trying to lean towards the strong area of La Nina, we had all this activity doing this, then one could infer that if we stay just outside of a moderate or stronger La Nina, a lot of the storms are going to want to do this. Somewhere in this general window of movement. If we saw 12 to 17 major hurricanes, that would mean that almost the entire alphabet has the potential of going major hurricane. So I don't think that's what's going to happen. 35 to 40 tropical storms, that'd be going through almost 2 different alphabets right there. I think now we're starting to get into hype territory again. And I do not condone such behavior. $16 to 25 major hurricanes. Folks, now we're definitely getting into hype land. We're definitely going way too off the charts. I do see the potential of seeing 20 to 25 named systems, probably even more than that. I could see us getting about a half dozen major hurricanes, and I could definitely see 12 to 15 actual full-fledged Cat 1 or stronger hurricanes. So 2024 is La Nina. Yes, that's what it's looking like. I would say this is a much bigger scale than 2020. I do agree with that. Because 2020 was much cooler out there. 2020, unfortunately, was a lot more on average in terms of Atlantic Sea temperatures. What will spring be like, do you think? Spring, we're going to start to see the transition not only from winter to spring begin to take hold, but I also do think we're going to start to see things begin to segue out of the El Nino winter into more of a traditional springtime pattern over the United States. So we're going to continue to see our tornado outbreaks. The tornado alley area, so to speak, or the hotspot for tornadoes, I do believe is going to slowly shift back towards the Great Plains. And then we'll probably continue to see some possible sea breeze style thunderstorms create some severe weather here in Florida, I do believe, especially once we get out of El Nino. A super La Nina. So now you're going against the CPC depiction of a cool neutral to a weak La Nina to a super La Nina. Yes, Isaac, I do think so. I do think that La Nina will peak. It's not going to be a strong La Nina. It's not. But it will peak for all intents and purposes. Brooke, I agree. I'm about to go do the same, definitely. It's time. It's been a very long day. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as saying a super La Nina. It's not going to be the super La Nina. It's going to be a combination of a very favorable Atlantic setup and allowing those hot waters to finally do what they're meant to do. So in layman's terms, Milagros, El Nino versus La Nina is warm versus cold. In an El Nino, our Pacific waters tend to be much hotter in the central and eastern parts of the Pacific Ocean, right off the coast of Central and South America. Whereas in a La Nina, those waters are cooler than the climatological average or the norm, and that's what helps to provide us with a much more favorable setup for hurricanes in the Atlantic because you don't have as much convective downrushes or convective outflows cooling off our tropical systems. They don't have a whole lot of wind shear down at the surface. They definitely don't have our subtropical wind shear in the mid to upper levels. If it's a weaker La Nina, I think it'll stay longer. Yeah, that's what I was just mentioning earlier, Isaac, is it looks like CPC is thinking we could see a weak La Nina is... I'm losing it, guys. I'm losing it. It looks like a weak La Nina could We're going to end the live stream. It looks like a weak La Nina could persist into 2025. And from that being said, we're going to go ahead and start cutting the live stream. We'll see you guys again on Wednesday. More than likely, we'll see exactly what the pattern shakes out to do and exactly what the weather pattern is doing. Wow, I cannot focus to save my life right now. I don't know what's going on. Maybe this is the way to get the Atlantic temps to go down is for us to have a hyperactive season of crazy storms so they can upwell the very... You know, Isaac, that's actually what the tropical cyclones are supposed to do, and that's probably why this year is going to be very catastrophic because we didn't have any of those systems actually upwell our waters over the Caribbean, over the Western Atlantic, over the Gulf of Mexico. So this hurricane season, we're probably going to see some very, very intense storms pop off in areas that didn't see any action whatsoever last year. And we're finally going to upwell those waters and try to get the Atlantic back to a little bit more of a state of equilibrium. And that's the worrisome part is without any of the upwelled waters out there, how much hotter are we going to be this next hurricane season because we have all that lingering ocean heat content down below the surface waiting to come up. That's the scary question. That's another elephant in the room. But thank you all very much for watching. We're going to go ahead and cut the live stream. I wish there was more to talk about in terms of live weather across the United States, but there really just isn't a whole lot happening. We have the severe icing potential that's going to continue to persist for the Midwest and the Great Lakes before transitioning off to the Northeast. And yeah, that's about it. Then it's just going to be rain, rain, and more rain. We don't really have a threat for severe. We don't have any blizzard conditions anytime soon. We don't have any winter storms coming up, thankfully, so I can stop seeing historic this. It's going to be historically boring across the United States for most of us. We'll still see some bouts of snow for the Great Lakes in the Northeast. So to be determined exactly what the rest of the U.S. looks like as we get closer and closer to February. And then it's 1 month down, 4 to go before the hurricane season, right? February, March, April, May. Yep. So, yeah. I also predicted a below hurricane season in the Eastern Pacific. I'm predicting 12 named storms with 2 to 3 hurricanes in the East Pac. We will see. We will see. That's all I will say. But good night, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please continue to share the channel if you could. Definitely follow the other social medias if you can, and we'll talk to you very soon. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.